Hi, guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host, Tony Evans. Um, this is going to be, again, another dive into the Anno Domini box set, the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath, my era Black Sabbath. No, there might be people going there saying, oh, not another one. Look, it's quite apt, really, today. I'm sitting here, it's a Sunday morning when I'm recording these days, and it's pissing down with rain outside. It's windy and howly and wintry. And I think to myself, this is the right time to look at this album. Now, I have honestly, truly, this is an album that sort of went past me really fast. It was 1994 when it was released on IRS Records, 31st of January, in fact, 1994. And I'd, at that point in my life, I just met Karen, my now wife, and I was spending a lot of time listening to a lot of hardcore punk at that particular. I was going through a real punk phase right at that point in my life. So heavy metal, because at that time, as I spoke before, it was a landscape of not much. Although there will be people out there that tell me there is. I mean, for me, it wasn't much, and so I sort of missed it. To be brutally frank. And it wasn't until about 2 or 3 years later that I managed to get a copy on CD, just by luck, actually. And I played it a few times, so it was pretty good. I mean, I was sort of in that phase where, unless it was Tia or Headless Cross, I was like, yeah, nah, I don't know, right? And I'm gonna be honest, absolutely hand on heart honest about that one. But this album, the remaster of it on both, if you're streaming it, if you've got it on CD or on vinyl, I have it on both. I have it on CD, vinyl, and I stream it. So three of it. If you have that option and play it, and you can play it in conjunction with maybe the original release of it, you will hear a quite vast difference. Sometimes with remasters, I don't get it. I don't understand what they've done. Like when Stephen Wilson remastered Marillion's A Misplaced Childhood, even he said in the show note, in these liner notes, that he didn't do much to it because it was a perfect album for the beginning. And I think, on reflection, that could be said about all of the Tony Martin era albums except Forbidden, which really did need to be remixed. This is remastered, not remixed. Okay, so it comes off the back of a rather tough era for the band, with not selling out stadiums, not big. I mean, to say that Black Sabbath is not big enough is really a crazy thought, isn't it? When you think about it, right? But they weren't big enough to sell out stadiums. The diehard Black Sabbath fans, like a lot of the diehard fans, are all right pig-headed and would say, oh no, it's not Ozzy or Dio. Oh, it's not Ozzy, it's not Geezer, it's not Bill Ward. Um, which is, quite blinkered a view, but understandable at the same time. So this, they'd had some issues with the Humanizer, the album before, with Ronnie James Dio. Now, I'm going to be controversial here. I love Ronnie James Dio. I love his voice. I love what he did with Black Sabbath. I absolutely love Rainbow and his solo stuff. God rest his soul. He's an amazing performer with an amazing voice. But, and this is the problem, no one is bigger than Sabbath. Like Sabbath as a whole, one of the issues that I always had with Dio, and it's one of the reasons why that I don't go back and listen to a lot of the Dio era Sabbath albums regularly, apart from Heaven and Hell, is that he wanted the band to be his. Like, I'm Ronnie James Dio, I'm bigger than the band. And that is not how I perceive it. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, Ozzy to some extent does have that feel, but he doesn't really, because he understands. I think maybe his wife doesn't, but he understands the balance of the band, and that's what makes Tony Martin such one of my favorite musical performers, one of my favorite singers in the band. After interviewing him a few years ago and realizing how just such a humble and intelligent man he is, he comes into this, and you can hear him in Headless Cross, you can hear it in Tia, you can hear it in Cross Purposes, you can hear it in Fallen Idol, you can hear it in Forbidden. He just sounds like he wants to be there to have fun, to be part of something, and just feels reverence that he's part of this, this behemoth of a band, this giant of musical history. Very much the same way I think Blaze Bailey did as well with Maiden. Like he just felt lucky that he was there, that he'd been picked. And God, thank God that Tony Iommi did pick him, because his voice is something. People say that he sounds like Dio. Yes, he does have a Dio-esque sound to him, but he also brings, if you ever watch him live with the band, which I have done, he brings a brilliant life to the Aussie tracks as well. But he, of the three singers, I mean, I know there's been more than three singers. I'm not going to talk about Glenn Hughes, but of the three singers, or what's her name from Deep Purple? Blank. I've gone blank. Ian Gillan. That aside, right, of the many singers that have been with the band, I think that Tony has got the biggest range. He has the most soul. And that's saying something from a Dio. I mean, Dio's got a lot of soul. But Dio is more dramatic. You know what I mean? Like he really pushes the thespian aspect of it. He's a thespian. You know what I mean? He really pushes that. Whereas when you see people like Ozzy, he's just there a grinning madman with a mic. Whereas Tony he's cultured, and because he's a multi instrumentalist. He knows music inside and out, and so what he brings to this the longest stint outside of Ozzy, actually, but the short stint with the band, really, in retrospect, he brings a nuance, a vocal power that you'll find on this album particularly. I think that this album, now re-listening to the remaster and listening to the box set from beginning to end many times since I've owned it, I haven't got a problem. I like it. Because of that, what I feel is that this album is his pinnacle vocally for the band. And people will say that maybe with Tia, or Headless Cross. Yeah, I think Headless Cross because it was the most successful. Tia because it's the most diverse. But this because I think for me, he brings more of himself to this album than all the others, like lyrically and thematically. Like I said last week, the week before last, sorry, that there's a lot of death imagery in his lyrics for the band, but because now that Geezer's back on board with this one, writing with him, there's a real sense of it's not an anti-Christian album by any means, but it is definitely a deep look at the inequality of organized religion. I think. I mean, I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have a lyric sheet for these songs, so I can't really sit down and study them. All I know is that when I listen to it, that's what I get from the songs. I mean, you can get them from the titles. I mean, the title, we've got Eyewitness, Cross of Thorns, Psychophobia, Virtual Death, Immaculate Deception, Dying for Love, Back to Eden, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Cardinal Sin, Evil Eye, and on the CD album, which is the one I'm reviewing, there is a bonus track of a Japanese single in What's the Use. It's 100. It's 50 minutes long as an album, so it doesn't hang around. The songs are sort of anywhere between 3 minutes to 5 minutes 50. They're very diverse musically, so you don't get yourself cloyed into one stodgy mess, which you're never going to get with Sabbath anyway, to be honest, really. I mean, I don't know how Tony does it, but regardless of what he does, he just makes this end has this endless supply of riffs that just seem to um, it just never copies itself. It seems to be endless with its flow. I mean, I'm not sure how he's doing it, but it is a timeless sound. It is a timeless sound. Um, Now the lineup for the band was interesting on this one. They were touted to have all the original lineup back by Ozzy, but that didn't happen. So you have your Tony Iommi on guitar, which is obviously always going to be there. Why isn't he a Sir yet? I have no idea. Um, Tony Martin on vocals, as we talked about. And then Geezer Butler comes back on bass, which is, and you can really hear it. Now, I love all the bass players that have played for Sabbath, but Geezer just has this, I don't know, there's something about him. And then on drums, it could have been, they looked at having a Cozy back, but he was too busy. So they got Bobby Rondinelli, who was from Rainbow, Blue Oyster Cult, and Quiet Riot. Now, he left Rainbow and Cozy joined Rainbow. So it was sort of a synergy there. But his drumming, I mean, I'm going to talk about it later on in the songs, or talk about each song as I go and what I think about them. But his drumming really does bring a different nuance to the band. No one's ever going to be Cozy Powell or Bill Ward, to be honest with you. But Bobby is absolutely fantastic on this album. It does contain very dark subjects, and one of the criticisms, which I find ironic, um, from some of the Sabbath fans when this came out, was there was a bit too much keyboard on it. Because we now get Jeff Nichols on the keyboards again. Now, sadly, he passed away, but we have R.I.P. Jeff. I hope you're up there tinkling the ivories and playing the piano. He's not credited on the original release. So if I got on my original CD, he's not on there. On the reissue, he is on the remaster, which I think is very good because he should be. I don't know why he wasn't, but one of the criticisms was there's too much keys. Well, hang on. Why don't you go back to listen to Tears? A bloody lot of keys on that. And you didn't criticize it the same way. And Headless Cross. So it's just, I don't know. It was 1994 when this came out. And there was a lot of crap out that year, and a lot of rubbish, and people had to discern through it. And of course, it was at the sort of burgeoning time. The music press was changing in '94. You know, Kerrang had been around a long time. Metal Hammer had been around a long time. The physical musical press, like NME and Sounds, was sort of becoming a glossy paper instead of a traditional style black and white inked newspaper, like a tabloid. It was changing. People's attitudes were changing, and I don't understand it myself. But anyway, also on this album, uncredited, is Mr. Van Halen on Cardinal Sin, and we'll talk about that again later on. But he couldn't be mentioned because of contractual issues, which again, that's a shame, isn't it? This is art, we should be able to, this is where the music industry gets right up my left nostril. I don't know why it gets up my left one, but it just gets up my left nostril. Really pisses me off is the contractual issues. Yes, there's money involved, so there has to be contracts. And because there's contracts, there has to be, I don't know, litigation, all sorts of stuff. It's art. If Eddie wanted to go and play with Black Sabbath, then bloody let him go play with Black Sabbath. I mean, he's not crossing any boundaries. He's not promoting himself in a way that it's my album, is he? He's just jumping and helping. I mean, we didn't have that kind of problem with Brian May on Headless Cross. He's on the album cover, Same probably with Jeff Nichols. I just don't understand it. Anyway, I'm sure someone out there will know why, the deep down. So some hardcore Van Halen fan will know why. Now, some of the concepts on this album, I won't be diving too deeply into because some of them are quite dark. I mean, they're very dark. A couple of the songs. I just don't want to. I don't want to take it down that avenue and become a true crime podcast or a podcast about serial killers, because it's basically what it is. A couple of these songs, but when we get to them, we might chat briefly about it. But there is some very dark things, uh, but it doesn't come across that way. It doesn't feel like you come out of it wanting to have to watch Mary Poppins. You know what I mean? It does sort of lift you up in musically anyway. And I generally think, and I'm with a lot of the reviewers of the time that now I think this is the best album since Mob Rules, and that's a big call, because in there you've got your Headless Cross, your Tear, your Fallen Idol, even Dehumanizer, which was a mismatch of an album that didn't really do it for me. Um, and a lot of people, unfortunately, you could feel the tension in the album when you listen to it between him and the band and Ronnie. And that's a whole different story. We may do that one day, just to talk about the backstory, because it's really quite interesting. But as I said, I think I've got written down here that I think that with Geezer back, it definitely adds a sense of depth to the rhythm section of the band. I mean, there's something that Geezer does that brings to the band. There's something I mean, without him, and I think this is very key. You have Tony's riffs, right? They're very amazing riffs, yeah, and they can only be but Tony with his riffs. But there's something Geezer brings to Sabbath that makes it Sabbath. Because Geezer was the main lyric writer of the band, and he, being a guitarist that becomes a bass player, he understands what Tony's doing, and instead of just sitting like a lot of bass players would do with a guitarist as good as Tony, they would sit on the root note and play, whatever. Say that Tony was in E, he'd be playing in E, right? He wouldn't be doing anything else. He'd just be in E, and sort of holding that rhythm down. But what Geezer does, he almost, if you listen very carefully, he picks out the solos almost note for note on his bass. Sometimes you can hear him really sort of in the same way that John Entwistle of The Who really drove that band. Now, this is going to, again, sound controversial, but it's how I feel. Pete Townsend is not the greatest guitarist on the planet. He never was. I don't think he admits that he ever was. And he's a bit one-dimensional sometimes. And so to get that oomph behind it, you have John thundering around, thunderfingers around underneath, to really rumble that and give that guitar some body. And it's just the same way, I think, with Geezer, because Tony, after his accident, has to use light gauge strings. And if you don't know about the accident, you're new to this podcast, go back and have a listen to some of my Black Sabbath podcasts. You'll know what I'm talking about, or just Google it. Basically, Tony had his top of his fingers cut off in a industrial accident on his last day of work before he went off to do music full time, and now he makes plastic fingertips because he's got extreme sensitive, because it's almost isn't like, it's very painful for him to play. So he uses very, very light gauge strings, and because he uses very light gauge strings, somehow he gets this very thick and heavy sound. But he needs more. He sometimes needs that more behind him, and you get that with Geezer. You get that with all the bass players that have played with him, to be fair. But something with Geezer and him, they just it's synergy, right? They just mesh. Anyway, I've chatted for 19 minutes, almost 20 this first half. So we're going to go off. I'm going to refresh my tea, and then we're going to come back song by song. I've made shitloads of notes. It's the first time I've actually sat down and made like 40 pages of notes. Normally, this last few episodes, I've sort of been doing points, not pinpoints, what's it called? Dot points. Because I've been a bit time poor recently, and with my father being very, very unwell, my brain has been in other directions. But this time around, I thought I'm really going to make an effort and do it. And I've got some interesting notes. You may go, oh, no notes, Tony, but you love it. You know you do. Anyway, let's get on, have some adverts. I'll talk to you on the other side. Oh, oh. Okay, bye for now. Welcome back, guys, to part two. Hope you enjoyed those wonderful adverts. I never know what's on them because I don't choose them. It's done by the company that uploads my podcast. But anyway, so first track. Now, as I said, this album musically is very, very infectious. I feel it's one of the most delicious, and I'm going to use that word a lot throughout this review. Delicious albums. It's so it's so bluesy, it's so rock and roll, but yet at the same time so heavy, with the most beautifully. It is one of the best produced albums of the later era of Sabbath. It's so well produced. I mean, the remastering has fixed a bit some of the things, but it's so well produced. Every layer, every member of the band is clear, precise, and punctuates where it needs to. Like, there's no. Sometimes with bands recently, I've heard the vocal being so far behind the guitars that they're almost. I think they're embarrassed that the vocal isn't quite good, so they just blast you with guitar. And the same the way the other way around. The vocals are pushed back and there's too much guitar. This really sounds dynamic. I'd love to hear it on a 5.1 if it ever comes out. I would love to hear that, um, just to hear the mix. I mean, on my very good record deck, the separation is just beautiful. It's just beautiful, and even the CD. And I'm not a big CD player, but the CD I listened to both to see if I could hear if there's any difference. And the CD is equally. It's also beautifully separated. It's a nice mix. Anyway, Eyewitness is the first track, and there's a couple of bands that when I listen to this album, I get a big influence set feeling of. Now, this is going to sound. I don't know. You're going to go. I don't hear it, Tony, but I just listen carefully. This album, like this track, opens up Eyewitness. Okay, and again, the lyric in it is a lot. There's a lot of religious connotations in the lyric. There's a brilliant, um, a brilliant lyric in it. I did write the only lyric I could actually remember to write down. It's in front of you the future, behind you history. I love that. What a lovely little bit of. It's such a sort of thing that Geezer would write because he's philosophy. So he's into philosophy. It reminds me of Wings. I went and saw late last year Paul McCartney in Sydney, and his last ever tour. And I, at that time, had never really been a big Wings fan. I'd listened to a lot of Wings. My brother was a huge fan of the band, and my friend Mel. And coming away from that, because he played a lot of Wings tracks, I went and listened to a load of the albums, just to afterwards to catch myself up. And there is a certain sound that McCartney gets, and he gets it in songs like Jet and Live and Let Live, Live and Let Die. Sorry, and it has that feeling. And ostensibly, thinking back to that also sounds like Led Zeppelin. There's also a lot of Zepp in this sounding in this album. I feel it's a great opener for the album. Tony's now there's two Tonys, so I've got to be careful what I say here. Tony Martin and Tony Iommi. I'll say the full name so it doesn't confuse us. Tony Martin's vocals shines through here. It really does. And Tony Iommi's hammer-ons. Now, I know it's just the way that he nuances. I'm smiling thinking about it. He nuances the hammer-ons just at the end of the phrase. And it adds a little of movement and passion and it adds depth to this very clever lyrical song, um, which is, I think, again um, about Christianity. I think again, don't don't hold me to that, but I think that's the nuance of the song. Tony Iommi has this way of being sounding solid, strong, rhythmic, heavy, and you know hunkered down, but at the same time can play at such speeds um, that it sort of blows your mind. And he does that in this track. He goes from a solid rhythm into this sort of like beautiful, and he doesn't. The great thing about Tony Iommi is that he doesn't overstate his solos. Yes, in the past he's had some drug-fueled solos. He will admit to that. But the latter albums, he jumps in as a noodle, creates some you know energy and some texture and concept, and then jumps out again and gets back straight into the riff, and it's just wonderful. There is only one Tony Iommi. That's truly the way it is. I mean, he has times when he sounds Gary Moore-ish on this album, because Gary Moore, is my favorite guitarist and blues guitarist, that is, and he has this lunacy to his phrasing, and sometimes um, Tony has that as well. It's just yeah. So that's a brilliant opening track. I it's sometimes albums can make or break themselves on the first song that you open up with, and this one doesn't let you down. It really doesn't, and it only runs at hang on. Here we go here, 4 minutes 56. It's not a long song by any means. 4 minutes is, yeah, it's long for some people, but it's no really that long. And then we get into Cross of Thorns, which runs at 4 minutes 40. Um, this one really sounds like it was probably recorded for Headless Cross. All right, I'm just having some tea. Sorry, off mic. Um, and but it has a timeless feel as well. So yes, it sounds like it could be from Headless Cross merging into some of the Tear album, but it's timeless and it's beautiful and it's a real headbanger. I've made that note and underlined with red pencil. It's a real anthemaic mix of acoustic and deep, rich bass with real clinical drums. It's a very addictive mix. And Tony's voice, I've just put big red letters. Wow. So I must have been thinking about that one. It is Tony Martin can put his lips and vocal cords around words and they don't get lost. Sometimes when Bruce Dickinson and to some extent even Rob Halford and Ozzy, they're so passionate. I'm not saying that Tony Martin's not passionate, but the way that they almost they use a lot more energy for the outcome of the vocal line, whereas Tony is here. He seems to have infinite time within the stanza of the music. He has an infinite time to deliver the vocal without it sounding rushed. It's very operatic, very bluesy. It's almost slower than you'd imagine it to be, almost at doom slow speed, but it's in a fast song. And I get that with this. It is about the hypocrisy of religion. I think that's most of the album in general. Cross of Thorns, it's the cross that Jesus wore. It's his what's the wrong word? It's the way of showing reverence to, or it's sort of like because Caesar wore the laurel leaves. I think it's that. I'm not Christian, so I don't understand the biblical concepts of it, but that's how I see it. So I think it's like to say, if you think you're the king, well, you're not. Here we are. Right? And we all have that image in our mind of Christ with the cross of thorns on, and it does feel like an attack on organized religion. I'm going to have to sit down one day and find, when I have time, and find write the lyric down as he sings it, so I can really, because you know me, I bloody love diving into lyrics. But um, the way that Tony Martin holds a note, it's just, he holds a note here at the end of the phrasing, and it's just, oh, I come back to it all the time. Keep it in the mic with my hand, so I'm gesticulating, um, and then I wipe myself down. No. No, it is. It's just yeah, just unctuous and beautiful and brilliant and dark and fast and heavy, but not too heavy. There's nothing in there that would offend anyone. No one's going to go, "Oh my god, I'm going to become a Satanist." Nah, nah, not at all. Um, Geezer's bass line behind it with Bobby on the drums is so beautifully mixed. Jeff's keyboards are there, but you just don't know they're there. It just pulls all of the song together. And then we come on to one of my favorite tracks on the album, Psychophobia. Now, Psychophobia is a dark song because it's about the Waco killings. All right. It's not something that I want to delve into because we all know, if you don't know about the Waco cult, there's lots of information online to tell you about it. I don't really want to give that piece of shit personally any more airtime as possible. Anyway, lots of people died. It was very much like if you know about the Jonestown massacre and drinking the Kool-Aid. It's a very kind of similar thing, right? Anyway, it's about that. So Psychophobia. Um, it almost feels new metal like. Now, I don't like new metal. I've told you that. The NU metal, right? That sort of um, mix of rap and metal, and it's sort of modernist kind of I don't know. It really rubs me the wrong way, and it sort of for me feels like people trying to just reinvent the wheel, and it doesn't quite work. But those that love it, that's fantastic. Please keep listening to it. I'm never going to change your mind. I don't want to change your mind. If you love it, you love it. That's brilliant. It's one of the heaviest tracks on the album, but what a groove. Oh, it's delicious. The drums are clean, precise, and perfect. They drive the groove along at such a forward pace. It does feel early 90s. It has a very early 90s feel. Makes me feel like I'm 18 again, I have to tell you. Because when I was 18, a lot of that, there was a lot of interesting stuff on the musical landscape. Unlike now, it was more easily accessible. There was all sorts of things. You had grunge, you had punk, you had metal, you had thrash, you had death metal, you had nu metal. You have it now, but it felt like when you're 18, you're absorbing more. You're like a sponge, right? So everything's just coming into your ears. And you're like, and that's a euphemism, isn't it? But anyway, everything's been absorbed into your head, and you're taking what you take. I was going for a deep dive into early prog. I was taking, interested into the darkest of black metals and the deepest and nastiest of satanic based music. I was, riding the wave of Maiden and Priest. I was doing everything, all the stuff. I was really getting into things like what's it called, the Prodigy, Beastie Boys. It was so much to come in your ears, and this track sort of makes me feel that way again. I don't know quite why. I mean, it's the groove, maybe. I don't know. That it is a really dark song, a dark lyric, and is a dark concept. Now, you might not get it in the lyric, but that's what Tony Martin said it's about. So I believe him. He said in an interview when the album was released. Um, it is deep. It's very deep, and it will take you. If you are my vintage, you will. I hope it does give you that same feel because it just does. It's my favorite on the album. One of my favorites on the album because of that. Just makes me, gives me goosebumps with enjoyment. Um, Putting aside the concept of it, it's the same way of Slayer's "Angel of Death." It's a really horrible lyric and a really horrible concept, but it's done with such reverence. The same with the Ed Gein song "Dead Skin Mask." But I digress. There was a point though when if you're using this kind of imagery for art, you cannot. It's very, very, very difficult um, not to make it sound like reverence. Yeah. It's also very difficult not to sound preachy at the same time as well, which is difficult. It's a difficult line to cross. That's why I would never go, as a musician, I would never go near the concept of the Holocaust. I probably wouldn't even go anywhere near um, serial killer concept. Skin, the band Skin, Skyn. They make all their songs about serial killers, and actually they're fucking brilliant. I might do one of their albums one day on the show. Highly recommend you going and searching out their stuff. I had the chance to sing with Download, but unfortunately COVID intervened. Anyway, brilliant stuff. Really brilliant. Their one about Jeffrey Dahmer is just it's crazy good. But I've written here that you have to listen to this song. I've written down big letters. Please repeat. Don't go playing it on back to back, but you will come to that song in the album and you'll go, "Shit, I've got to come back to that again." It's just got just brilliant. I would have released it as a single. Maybe they couldn't because subject matter. Who knows? And then we move on to Virtual Death. Now, Virtual Death is a big operatic track. It opens with Geezer on bass, just him, and it's heavy and it's direct. And for someone that plays with his fingers, and I don't know if this particular track was played with his fingers, I know he does in general, it is a brute of a bass line. It is an absolute brute of a bass line. To be honest, it's actually quite scary. If I listen to it, and I listened to it the other night in bed in the dark, and I'm not wholly scared of the dark. I don't like the dark. Dark places that I don't know, I'm scared of. Dark places that I know, well, no problem. It's quite a human natural thing, I think. I don't think that's something that's unusual. But when I was playing this particular track, I really it gave me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, to be honest with you. It screams Sabbath. It screams 70s to early 80s Sabbath. It really does. And it's so wonderfully doomy. It's the slowest number on the album, I reckon, but it has this crazy speed changes, like I talked before with Tony's change of direction. Something that Maiden does extremely well, and I wouldn't necessarily think that of Sabbath. I always think they're quite direct, but I might be wrong with that one, but every space within the song is filled with Bobby and Geezer's bottom line. It is thunderous. It is a cracker of a song. Again, the lyric, I'm not going to pretend I can understand. I know what the lyrics about, and that might. If those that come here like me to talk about the lyrics, maybe I'll have to do a side one on the lyrics once I get them. I even pulled my old copy out, and there's no lyric sheet there because it never came with one. So anyway, it is a brilliant track. Again, doesn't hang around for too long. What's its time? Virtual Death sits in at 4 minutes 50. Sorry, 5 minutes 49. So it's a bit longer one on the album, but I think that's because it has that real geezer solo opening at the beginning when it's and Bobby's beautiful cymbal work in there attached on top. Okay. You hear this paper turning? You love that, don't you? And then we get to Immaculate Deception. Again, it's religion, isn't it? I mean, it it's obvious if the album's called Cross Purposes, isn't it? With an angel on the front, right? Um, this is a classic Sabbath riff. It's got a chunky chainsawy sound. It's dirty. It's bluesy. It's it's so Tony Iommi. Tony Martin's voice mixed in this so well, and this shows you on this album how well it's mixed because this is a big track, and and Tony's deliverance of the chorus, the way he holds the word deception out, it almost like goes out past you in the stadium or out past you from the stereo, out through the room, out through the door, out through the front door, down the street. It's got a pint of beer, it's had a pint of beer, and it's come back and it's still going. You know what I mean? It's just got this length of note in the vocal delivery that is something um, beautiful and wondrous in that. It's just, I said, Geezer and Tony Iommi just combine here, and like the old days, it just feels like old Sabbath, and it makes you just warm and glow inside. But the speed changes that are brought on a drop of a hat, like I mentioned before, by Bobby, he just changes speed on the kit, and the band follow him. They just turn on a dime. The punctuation and the syncopation, and don't say you can't say that if you're drunk, but the punctuation, the syncopation in this album, on this particular track, in fact, the whole album is classically Sabbath. You can see why I think people say it's the better thing since Mob Rules. The solo has a sort of heads of cross sound. It was probably left over maybe from some recording done on the album. Sometimes bands do that. We've talked about before in the past. But how Tony Iommi stays with this particular sound and jumps in and out with his solos punctuating the track. He's not one of these guitarists that has to show off, and we've mentioned Van Halen before, and he's not a Van Halen. I love Eddie. God, I love his work, but you know what I mean? He's brash and bravado and loud and fast and typically American and everything we love about that kind of thing. He's not a Ewingija Malmsteen. He's not someone that has to feel like he needs to be part of the band and full of machismo and speed and look how many notes I can play kind of crap. He jumps in, does his thing, jumps out, punctuates it for a reason. It's there for a bloody good reason. And this song, he does that in this song so well. Then we get Dying for Love, the next track. Now, Dying for Love runs in at 5 minutes 53, the longest track on the album. This one is quite an obvious song. It's right up there in the title. And relationship issues. The opening solo here is probably my favourite, and this is a big call, guys, but I'm putting it here on audio for history and time to know. My favourite solo by Tony Iommi outside of the solo from Dirty Women from Technical Ecstasy. It starts with it. It's very brave to start an album with a solo. But because it's a blues solo, it's beautifully punctuated. It's got wonderful sustain. It's clearly notated. It's got, it's everything that's wonderful about Tony's solos. It's delicate, yet aggressive. It's powerful, yet soft. It's contradictory within itself. And I really get real Gary Moore, as I said before, get very GM vibes with the solo. It's just brilliant. And I've written here, Tony Iommi, take a bow. And yes, you should. It's bloody wonderful. In fact, I would love that whole piece of music just to play the whole song, just as an instrumental. But You can't have everything. But Geezer Butler's bass rumbles in the back, and Tony Martin brings a soulfulness to the lyric in this song. A real heartbreak in the sound of his voice. It it just proves my point perfectly that it's a simple riff that Tony works with in this album can make such a difference. It just works. Close Your Eyes and the mastery of Rondinelli on the drums, his cymbal work, tapping out the moments of deep thoughtfulness underneath the Tony Martin vocal is something that only Sabbath can do. I mean, you know me if you listen to my show regularly. I love drumming and bass, and my drums and bass. I love drums, but just when a production is done in such a way that the hi-hat cymbals and the ride cymbals just cut through like a hot knife through butter. They cut through the density of the muffled, immenseness of Geezer Butler's bass and the intricacies of Tony's soulful Syrian blues guitar, and then Tony Martin's brilliant vocal. It just cuts through, and you get that little kind of just sears that, and it breaks up the nuance, and it makes you, I don't know, it's something about, I've always find cymbal work on drums my favorite thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a good drum roll and a nice, but there's something about the way a cymbal cuts through, and it just cuts through and breaks up the rhythm, and it's just, on this, it's masterful. And you only get it with the remaster, and it's very, very obvious on the CD, actually. And then we move into Back to Eden, another religious based song. 3 minutes 57, again, not a long song. This is more groovy. So I've used the word groove a lot in my notes, and I can't help but say this because it's very, very groovy. It shows you don't have to be extremely heavy to be heavy. I've written here. The solo is quite simply bluesy. It doesn't dress it up. It keeps it simple. It keeps doing what it's doing. It perfectly punctuates the lyric, which also is not a dense lyric either. It's not, Tony Martin he's not a wordy vocalist. He's not going to do a Peter Gabriel or a Fish, or he's not going to fill every void with a word, because that's their power. They don't have an instrument, so that's what they do. Because Tony is a multi-instrumentalist, he knows how to punctuate a song with a lyric, right? He knows. It's not, it leaves space, is what I'm trying to say here, for the music to shine through and the band to be themselves. And I just really appreciate that in a lyricist. I really do. Geezer knows that as well. He's another one, because he's a musician and he's writing the lyrics. He knows how to leave that space. It's not my favorite track on the album. If of anything, it's the slightly weaker one. If there is a weaker one on this album, I don't want to say that. It's just not my favorite track, but it is completely different to everything else on the album, which does give you a little bit of change of pace, a bit of that way. And then we move to The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. This is another dark song, my friends. This is about a nurse in the UK who killed infants. And I'm going to say, that's all I'm saying, okay? You can go and look up what you want, read that story, go online and it will tell you. I don't really want to bring out, again, I don't feel like I want to I don't know, sorry, I just don't feel I want to it's a promoter anyway. It's a horrible, horrible story. But back in the 90s, a nurse killed a few infants. Now she's in prison for life in a mental institution. Recently happened again last year or the year before, wasn't it? Again in the UK. It seems to be a pattern, unfortunately. But this song is about that. Now, there's also a movie called Hand That Rocks the Cradle. It did not come out the same year. It came out years before that. I think it came out in like 91. 1990, 91. Anyway, um, the lyric is dark. Okay, um, Geezer is oozes culture in this song. In this, it's heavy, it's cathedral like, it's dark, it's such a dark story. Jeff Nichols' keys here, I haven't talked about him yet much, but he really creates this um, otherworldly, spiritually dark atmosphere. Um, it's very dreamlike. Um, it's what Tony with his voice is so good at, that he's managed to tell this horrible story, if that's what it's about. That's what he said it's about. Um, without being without naming names, without being graphic, without being too direct. He's doing it with symbolism and again, brilliant solo in the middle of this song for something. I mean, I mean, I could do a whole show on Tony Iommi, couldn't I? I don't need to keep on about his solos because everyone knows how bloody good his riffs and solos are. But Geezer and Bobby in this song, again, there's cymbal work coming through and the rolling thunder of drums. It's just oozingly brilliant. And then we move on to Cardinal Sin. Um, again, brilliant verse. Cardinal sin, cardinal sin. I just love it. Um, again, you can look into what cardinal sin is. I'm not going to tell you. I'll like you to investigate it for yourself this time. But it's quite an obvious thing what cardinal sin is. Okay. Um, it is. It sounds like it's played in the church. It opens like it's got a very Wings and Zeppy sound, as I said before. It could be a movie soundtrack. It sounds like it could be recorded for or used as an album soundtrack, which is crazy. This is, I reckon, possibly best Tony Martin's best vocals on the album. I've said it before, but it oozes menace. It's a headbang. You have to headbang to this track. There is no stopping you on that. You can't. It's got tumbling drums, snap. There's overdriven guitars. There's Eddie Van Halen solo on this. Um, has his swagger. It has his speed. It has it's Van Halen all over. It's clinically sharp. It's dynamic. It's fast. It's something that Tony Iommi isn't. In that respect, that Van Halen plays within chord structures that Tony would never probably think of doing. Even though Eddie would probably say he was influenced by him, and I'm sure he was, but Eddie's got this way of playing in very strange, augmented chords, and with a sort of youthful dynamism that Tony wouldn't have had then, and you can hear it. And I said I've written here in big letters. I fucking love the chorus. Sin, cardinal sin. Um, so again, I think that's up there with probably in my top two favorite songs on the album because of the Eddie connection, the speed of which it's been played at. Tony's vocals are brilliant. I love the chorus. I love the concept of it. And it's got a Wings and Zepp swagger, and I just love it. And then we move into Evil Eye. Now, this was a single, and I've written in big letters, simple but wonderful. It's very simple. You can see why they chose as a single. It was recorded directly from a jam. Like most of this album apparently was recorded from jams, but this one was really one they said that they picked out the most. It was a jam. It has a great sing-along chorus. It's got riffs that will melt your face in it. It's really old school Sabbath. It's got the kind of riff that puts you in a trance. You know that the way that Sabbath had that kind of druggy, nuancy, doomy vibe that you could sit there and just rock slowly, and if you're so inclined to take some kind of substance, and I'm not condoning it, if you take it and then sit there and let the world rock around you. That's what Sabbath did really, really well, particularly mid-Sabbath era. It does have a Paranoid. It sounds like it could be on the Paranoid album. It's fun. It's easy to listen to. And it it just has Geezer's rumbling, traditional finger placed played bass. He plays with these black strings, right? I think I might have mentioned this. He plays with these black strings that are coated black strings. I got a set, and yeah, he uses a heavier gauge, and he uses a Fender Jazz, and I have a Fender Jazz, and I was like, yeah, okay. And bloody hell, man, um, I got like burns on them. I don't know how he does it. He must have fingers like as thick as bloody leather. They're just. I've got decent bass player fingers, right? They're good callous fingers, but Christ, it nearly took half my finger off. I had to take them off in the end. I now use a Rotor Sounds, but yeah, whew. And what a way to finish the album. Technically, this is the last album on the song. On the album, song on the album. Blah. If you have the traditional CD, cassette, or vinyl, um, and you'd be pleased to think, what an album! I mean, from beginning to end, what an album! It ends with a traditional, heavy, doomy, delicious song like "Evil Eye," and you think, thank God, what a great album I just left. But then, if you have the CD, and this is why I'm saying, on the download on all stream platforms, wherever you get your platform, wherever you get your music, or on the CD in the box set. I don't. They will probably release the CDs individually if you do not want to buy the box set. I'm sure that will happen, and I'm going to tell you now. I'm going to buy them individually. Um, when they do come out, or if you've got the box set already, get to that last track on the album, which is "What's the Use." It's a tumbling, free-form drum opening with a riff that takes you on a breath away. It has this um, originality to it that I wish they'd released, put on the album. I genuinely think it could have sat on the album. And not one song can be taken away from the album. I wouldn't take a single song away to put it in. But the lucky Japanese, you lucky Japanese that got this as a single back in '94. What a shame that we didn't get it. It's very much a cinematic and chaotic solo I've written. It's heart pounding, it's deep, it has a riff that that is like a dog with a bone. It just will not give up. Um, it takes all your strength away. You at the end of this song, at the end of What's the Use, you've just come out of an album that if you are invested in it as much as I am, you just have no energy. Like I can't listen to another album afterwards. I have to give a big space either side of it just to be able um, to. I couldn't go from this album say to Forbidden. I couldn't do it. I have to have a break. So that's the album. Brilliant. As you might know, with my glowing terms, I'm going to give this 5 out of 5. This sits. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it sits very comfortably with Headless Cross, Tear, and this. This is it. The trivium, the trifecta, um the three greatest late era Sabbath albums. Even better than 13, which I never really liked, to be honest, when Sabbath's reunion with Ozzy. Absolutely golden album it deserves to be in your collection. It deserves to be in your favorites list, and it deserves to be listened to much more greatly. I'm very glad that the box set is at #1 in the UK and in the US, and it's doing very well around the world. And it shows you that there was a want for it and a big need for it, and people really wanted it. And to pay something like 350 US to get an original copy of Cross Purposes is ridiculous. So now, being able to just put this on your turntable in a nice heavy 180 gram vinyl pressing and a beautiful CD box set that people don't particularly like because they're cardboard covers. I like it because it's a bit more environmentally friendly. It's just brilliant. Anyway, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed this chat about the almost flawless album Cross Purposes by Black Sabbath. And if you want to, go back and listen to one of my early episodes where I talk about Headless Cross, and then listen to my Sabbath. I did a 4-part Sabbath breakdown. I also did a 4-part Aussie breakdown, and I think you might enjoy this one at the end of that afterwards, or listen to this verse and go back. Who knows? Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But thanks for listening. Thanks for staying with me for this hour, as you always seem to do. We'll chat next week. And who knows? Who knows what we can talk about? I always have a plan, but they often do change. Bye for now. Keep rocking, keep safe, and stop and make sure. Stop there. Stop right there. Stop before you press stop. Don't stop the button. Give me a like and subscribe. Give me a star rating, whether it be 1 to 5. I don't care if it's 1 if you hated it. If you've got all the way to the end of the album of this program and you give me 1, if you give me 1 star. Sorry. I am English and I do like innuendo. If you get to the end of this episode and you give me 1 star, at least you listened to the episode, didn't you? But anyway, reviews, ratings, come to my YouTube channel, chat to me there, as most people seem to leave chat to me there. Spotify has a section where you can talk to me, leave me notes, leave me reviews, whatever your thoughts are. What's your favorite song from the Tony Martin era Sabbath, now that the box set's out? Let me know. Anyway, ciao for now. Keep safe. Keep rocking. Talk to you next week.